Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. Today, we're going to start a week-long look and comparison and battles of some classic double albums. Okay? Classic double albums, not live albums. We're actually going to start the classic live album wars right after Labor Day weekend. Okay? And we're not going to do some of the concept double albums that we've already kind of covered, so you're not going to see The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, you're not going to see Tales from Topographic Oceans, and a couple others that we've done before in other battles, but we're going to pick out there's so many great double albums that have been released in rock history, right? So we're going to try and pull those ones out that we haven't looked at yet and put some of them against each other. So today we're going to go to 1969. One of these double albums happens to be a debut, and it's one of the finest debuts ever. And, who in their right mind would ever release a double album as a debut album? Why, the Chicago Transit Authority, right? Later known just as Chicago. 2 LPs of stellar rock and pop and jazz rock and blues all kind of mixed in. Got a horn section, okay, kick-ass drummer, great bass player who also sings, keyboard player who also sings, and a phenomenal guitar player who also sings, right? Up against that, the 5th album from Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention, Uncle Meat, another double album, okay? Originally kind of created as a concept to be a soundtrack to some bizarro science fiction movie, which actually never wound up getting made, right? But a lot of the kind of themes, both musical and lyrical themes that kind of happened on this album kind of floated throughout a few Frank Zappa albums, right? Or Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, I should say, albums right around that same time. A very bizarre album. Again, bits of classical, certainly avant-garde, rock and jazz and blues, psychedelia, all kind of permeating around this album. Now, both of these were top 50 albums, Billboard charts here in the U.S. This one was a little bigger seller overall and had some couple hit singles on it, or more like rock singles. We can't really compare what was single material on the early Chicago stuff with what we later knew as the pop ballad singles from Chicago in the 80s, right? Whereas this is about as uncommercial as it gets, but, garnered a lot of interest because the Mothers of Invention, pretty popular band at the time, right? Late 60s kind of psych band, all right? Although they were much more than a psychedelic band, obviously. So some very completely different albums, but released the same year, both double albums. So that's where we're going to look at them closely together today. So, like I said, this is one of my favorite debuts of all time. It's a great album. I'm a huge, huge Terry Kath fan. I think he is was one of the greatest guitar players of all time, taken away from us way too soon, and I think his genius just lives throughout all those early Chicago albums from the 70s, and this is one of my favorites. So it starts off with Introduction, a great kind of up-tempo, kind of funky, jazzy rocker, right? Does anybody really know what time it is? The classic single, pop single from this album, probably the mellowest track on the album. Then you got Beginnings, those great chord progressions. It's just kind of breezy, sunny song. The great horn arrangements, great vocals, catchy tune. Question 67, 68, majestic, anthemic, love it. Listen, another cool kind of bluesy hard rocker, all right. Bubble and Kath guitar work. Poem 58, another song just bursting with the electric guitar stylings of Terry Kath. Man, his guitar work on this album is just some of the best ever. Freeform guitar, speaking of guitar, just something they recorded him just making noise in the studio, right? Feedback and, tremolo bar, nonsense, awesome. South California Purples, a raging, blistering rocker with savage guitar work. And then, of course, their cover of the Spencer Davis classic I'm a Man, which, in my opinion, is better than the original. Just dynamite. They just made that song their own. Okay, then you got Prologue, all right? Someday, all right? They kind of go together there. Um, Prologue, August 28th, 1968. Someday, August 29th, 1968. Both the same day. Kind of a cool little continuation of two themes there. And then that kind of segues into the Amazing Liberation, okay, which has all sorts of news sound bites and things like that. You get all the Martin Luther King stuff, all that kind of stuff. Just a great, great tune. Again, the kind of like the jazzy, almost psychedelic and prog elements going throughout this album. Remember, this is 1969. A lot of this way ahead of its time. All right, one of the first bands to really incorporate like horns into a rock format like this. Okay, with pop, with jazz, a lot of great vocals, the horns. I mean, just a really, really original sounding, amazing album. All right, one of my favorites. Uncle Meat. It's kind of hard to pick out like tracks of this album because this is one of those albums you kind of need to take in as a whole. And there's a lot of weirdness going on here, a lot of kind of weird, trippy sound effects and all sorts of noises. And like I said, it's very avant-garde, but there are a lot of like elements of pure genius in this album because, of course, Zappa by this time is just starting to really create and think about all these kind of like musical ideas that have been simmering in his head throughout the 60s and throughout the 70s would just nonstop, right? The guy was just creating and putting down to tape all sorts of musical zaniness, and then, live he had like the best bands, okay? Including this one was great as well. But you got on here, let's see. Let's find out, The Legend of Golden Arches, Dog Breath, The Year of the Plague. What else we got here? Cruising for Burgers, which is awesome. That would even take on another life live throughout the 70s that's coming. You got the amazing long and lengthy King Kong suite, which is just absolutely brilliant. Mr. Green Jeans. What else we got on here? A Pound for a Brown on the Bus. Ian Underwood whips it out. I mean, just the Uncle Meat variations. Electric Aunt Jemima. Again, not an album where it's like you start picking out tracks because a lot of them kind of segue into each other. You got a lot of quick little tracks of little weird noises and, odd vocalizations and narration and things like that. And then you got these really complex, almost, free jazz explorations, some really tight musical arrangements and compositions. So there's like all sorts of stuff on this album. Like I said, rock and classical and jazz and blues and pop and psychedelia, all kind of swirling around. So, like I said, two really different albums. One, very, very accessible, really rocking in spots, okay? Blistering guitar work, amazing horns, okay? And in this, just experimentalisms, experimentation all over the place, all right? Again, two bands that were way ahead of their time, but in different ways, okay? Different ways. I think, if you were going to look at pure originality and doing something completely different than anybody else was doing, got to go with this one. But for a band that just had it all in around this time period where the tunes were catchy, the tunes were rocking, satisfied that rock itch, that jazz itch, a little bit of blues. If you liked experimentation, had it there. Great soloing. And even the proggers love this album. You got to go with this one. So basically, for me, I love Zappa. Okay? I like this album. This is not one of my favorite Zappa albums. Okay? But I do dig it. And it's got a lot of, like I said, there's moments of genius on here. There's like a handful of tracks on here that are just like, mind-blowing. And again, Zappa and his bands going forward would even, further explore and experiment with. But for me, I'm going to go with this one. For me, this is a fifth-round knockout, okay? Just the mighty power of the Chicago Transit Authority, in my opinion, just cannot be denied. We could probably find some other Zappa albums that probably match up to this a little bit better in terms of just like staying power and immediacy. right? There's going to be some out there that are going to be like, no, nothing that Chicago could have ever done is going to amount to what Zappa did on any of their albums, and that's cool, right? Because I know plenty of people who think that way. I picked these two for a reason to go together because of the year they were released, and they're both double albums, right? So that's not going to change that. But like I said, I like a bunch of albums in Zappa's catalog better than this one, although I appreciate the hell out of this. But there's not many debuts. Okay, I'll just get it out right now. There's not many debuts, rock debuts, that are better than this. There's also not many double albums that have ever been released that are better than this, in my opinion. It's one of my favorites. So, KO, Round 5, Chicago Transit Authority, self-titled debut. Visit us on the web at www.seeatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube every damn day. So we're going to be coming at you for the next couple days into the weekend with classic double album wars. So you can expect to see, maybe Led Zeppelin, maybe The Who. Who knows? All sorts of other stuff. Maybe some ELO. Maybe some Elton John. We'll see. Maybe some Jimi Hendrix. Maybe some Cream. You never know. More coming at you over the next couple days. As we make our way to the Labor Day holiday weekend here in the U.S., that'll kickstart a month or two of classic live album wars. But till then, we're going to do double album wars. All right, finish out September, or finish out August, I should say. Move into September. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. And anyway, so see you tomorrow morning, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.